Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, I'm back again. I have been noticing that people that I've known in the past have left this world. So it means something to make it from one day to the next. And I'm not religious. I never play the religion card. I'm not superstitious. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in ghosts, goblins, long-leggedy beasties, or things that go bump in the night. What I can see, what I can touch, what my mind can grasp are the things I rely on, because if you are a writer, they say, write what you know. I have to deal with the world and the way I live on the basis of what it is that I know, what I think that I know, what I'm convinced of, and what, even if I don't know enough to have the whole answer, convinced that I'm moving in the direction that will take me toward the answer, which once I get it, will put me in a position where I want to be or take me a step closer. I said last time that if I didn't, I intended to, when you're old like I am, I'll be 85 July 10th, you can get away with things, lapses of memory, and people will say, well, that's the way old people are. Well, sometimes though, brothers and sisters, and all you young folks, oh, to look back and be a mere 70 again. But at any rate, old people get clever, and there's a term wily, which means almost slick and clever. Old people hear what they want to hear. They don't hear what they don't want to hear. They forget what they want to forget. They remember what they need to remember. So in the same way that not every closed eye is asleep, not every mind that seems to be slipping is indeed on a slippery slope. As you go through life, you realize that if there's information you want from certain people, the best way to get it is to approach in the guise of a searcher after truth. As one poem said, don't look too good nor talk too wise. That way, nobody is intimidated or feel that they're under a microscope being examined, analyzed, and pulled apart. They are viewed as a source of information. Most people who know something are happy to share what they know. And that could be in the DNA of human beings, a natural desire, if it's not squelched out in school or in church or someplace else, to share what you know that you think is good or helpful with other people. It's a poor car that won't toot its own horn. I'd indicated that I'm going to talk about some of the things that I did in the legislature, because not everybody reads the newspaper. I was one of those people, even though I was in the newspaper a lot, who would not readily give interviews. The reporters had to catch as catch can. When they would ask me why I was so unwilling, unlike other politicians, to give interviews, I would invariably point out that what I'm saying may not apply to you. But after being around as long as I have, I get a picture and an image of the approach taken by reporters. They may have studied journalism from the same book, the same professor, or whatever. But generally, reporters, when they're on a certain subject that they are assigned to, will prepare before they interview somebody who knows something. They will have an idea of the questions they want to ask, and they know enough about the subject and the person to realize when the question has been answered, then they'll move on to something else. I will give everybody an opportunity the first time around to be themselves and show me what they are. And sometimes it's pretty poor stuff. As mild-mannered a person as I am, as easygoing as I try to be, as reasonable as I am. Some people seem to be intimidated when their job is to interview people in the position I'm in, even if the person is not like me. But preparation is the key. Know what that person is about. Have a goal in mind you're trying to reach with your interviews. And anybody who talks to the media often will detect almost instantaneously if the person taking the interview knows what he or she is about, knows the subject matter, or if he or she missed an assignment and is just trying to get some words to fill space. When that occurs and they don't have the time to properly prepare, I don't have the time to give interviews. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I've done in the legislature, not just because and by virtue of being a senator, but while doing all the things that a state senator does, there were other things I gave time to, such as monitoring the judicial system, police departments, the courts, as distinguished from the judicial system, meaning judges, but how things actually occur in court, the tactics of prosecutors, and so forth. I'm going to start with a comment that an officer, he was retired at the time. He used to work for the Omaha Police Department. I'd heard his name, but I don't remember him. When I made an analogy, it was about an officer, well, a member of the legislature, not an officer, trying to get the legislature to allow people to carry concealed weapons in establishments where liquor is sold. My view is that guns and liquor don't mix. Even in those establishments where people are not armed, fights break out, arguments, disputes, maybe somebody gets hit upside the head with a bottle, a chair, an elbow, a fist, or whatever. But when there's a gun, that tends to give people false courage. And some people will pull a gun with no intent to use it. An accident of circumstances will cause that individual to pull the trigger while pointing at somebody. And now you have a corpse, you have a murderer, and you have another statistic. Issues are better understood if they're placed in a context. You look at the surrounding circumstances. I had said, and I thought all people, even racist white people, would understand, and some of them did, even the racists who pretended not to, that the fear that they had, because I asked the senator why he thought these people should have guns. I had talked on other occasions about Al Qaeda, ISIS, and so forth. He said, Senator, you'd made some good points about ISIS and these radical, dangerous groups. And because of that, people are fearful and they carry guns. I said, they carry guns in America, they carry guns in Omaha, in Bellevue, in Lincoln, because of what's happening in the Middle East. I said, our ISIS is the police. Anybody would understand an analogy that what you fear that makes you carry guns is ISIS. What we fear is not what's happening in the Middle East. We are fearful of what's happening in our community at the hands of those who not only are authorized to carry guns and put us in jail, but have a license to kill us. And they will always be justified. We know it. You see it on television. In those days, there was not as much coverage as now, but there was enough for white people to know what I was talking about, but they pretended not to understand. And one of those nutty local talk shows in Lincoln misstated my words. He got it right when he said ISIS. Chambers said that the police are his ISIS. And then he began to talk about how ISIS cuts people's heads off and all the things that ISIS actually did, and then commingled that with my comment and gave the impression that I was saying that police cut people's heads off and so forth, which I never said. And we know that that's not what is being done. But enough methodology of killing is available to the police, and they use it against us, so that the fear that we have as Black people, if we fear anybody who's toting pistols, is the police. After the thing blew up and the legislators saw something to jump on bandwagon with, because national Fox News picked it up and also misrepresented what I said because it was an easy story. Here's what this police officer wrote to the World Herald. The caption of his letter: he was respectful when I pulled him over. This was April 1st, 2015. Thank you, Senator Ernie Chambers. Thank you for knowing how to act properly in a traffic stop. Like other officers, I had the opportunity to stop the senator for allegedly speeding in 1987. It did not go to court. He was protected by law, so he is not guilty of anything, as it should be. During the session, for petty things, legislators cannot be arrested. And that was based on the early days of the colonies and even in England, where if the other side did not want a certain person to say something in Parliament or the Senate or the House or the local legislature, they put that person under arrest so he or she could not function. Carrying on. It was a textbook nighttime traffic stop on how to interact with the police in a calming fashion, something that the younger generation desperately needs to be taught. A hands up, don't shoot, if you will. Slow movement, letting me know what he was reaching for, civil, no attitude, even though we had a disagreement. Chambers' recent vitriolic language toward Omaha police does not match how he actually behaves. Unfortunately, I have never heard him publicly teach that decorum to the public, who need to hear it from him. It could save lives. Now here's where a cop, in a backhand way, is giving me credit for being a person that will be listened to, but it's to make a different point from the one of me having that approach that people will hear. Continuing, we all have demons from the past. You either overcome them or succumb to them. Chambers is a smarter man than what was on display recently in the legislature. Then my comment as I handed out this article: colleagues, I know how to treat everybody. That is the way I want to be treated. There's a time and place for all things. The place for me to contend with police is in court, the time at trial. The attachments show I know something about the law and that the courts, even if not this legislature, respect that knowledge. I won cases at the trial level, which did not lead to an appeal to the Supreme Court, and cases remanded by the Supreme Court for a new trial resulted in my winning the trial or the prosecutor declining to re-prosecute. There are a lot of things people don't know because they don't read the books reporting cases, but I'm going to go through a few things and it'll show how I will step up when I'm not approached by somebody to help them. As a senator, I say this repeatedly. When we are what they call sworn in, the Chief Justice stands in the front of the legislature. All of the new senators make a semicircle, and those who've been re-elected. Each new term, you're sworn in. Well, in the early days of this country, there were people who belonged to religions where they would not swear. They would not take an oath. And they based it on what Jesus said: swear not at all. Not by heaven, because it's God's throne, not by the earth, because it's his footstool, not by Jerusalem because it's the holy city, words to that effect, not by your head because you cannot make one hair white or black. I tell you, swear not at all, yet let your yea be yea, your nay be nay. Anything more than this comes of evil. That's what Jesus said. It's in the Bible. And yet they will have people in court put their hand on the Bible and do the very thing that Bible says they should not do. But that's the way people are. They go by what they're taught, not by what their brain would tell them if they'd use it. So, because when the Constitution was put in place, and some people had come to this country because they were persecuted in England, but they came here with a vicious religion of their own, where they persecuted people, especially females. The way you test if a woman is a witch, you throw her in the water, weight it down, and if she sinks, she's a witch. And if while she's sunk under the water with these boulders holding her, if she drowns, that proves she's a witch. That's what these white Christian men did in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But they should have said the Father, the water, and a lot of smoke. But at any rate, the Constitution said there cannot be a religious test in order to hold a public office. In other words, you didn't have to belong to a certain religion, but in practice, people who call themselves Christians believe that, because now you see rats like Herbster and fools like Pillin talking about being Christians. Then that means they're not interested in Jews, they're not interested in Muslims, they're not interested in Taoists, they're not interested in Hindus, they're not interested in anybody except white Christians. And they don't practice what Jesus said. And Jesus asked the question then that he would ask now, why call ye me Lord, Lord, and you don't do the things that I say? These people confess me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. That's what Jesus said. And that's why he's not going to make a return trip to this planet until he comes to do some separating the wheat from the chaff, if you go by what the Bible said. But because he'd be hung up again. Whenever an oath is administered, and the word oath simply means a solemn statement. Solemn is supposed to get across the idea that it's very serious. It is a point in time that can be looked at and pinpointed when you made a statement that was supposed to be true, and it was made under circumstances where if it's false, you can be punished. In other words, perjury. So when these oaths, as they're called, are administered, it always says, and the Chief Justice says it, do you swear or affirm? Affirm means you agree to it, you give your word, your promise. I would always say affirm. I don't need to swear by the Father, the water, and the holy smoke, or laddie-o, daddy-o, and spook. None of that for me. My word binds me more than any magical incantation such as that. And when we say that we will carry out, based on the words of that oath in the Constitution, and I'm paraphrasing, this job to the best of our ability, and we take this oath without mental reservation, that means you don't say the words, but in your mind you're saying, but I ain't gonna do it. It means you're open-hearted, honest and forthright, and you do what you say. When there are people whose circumstances bring them within the ambit of what I should do as a senator, who took that oath and gave my affirmation, I don't look at their race, religion, or anything else. I look at their circumstances, and I deal with the circumstances that people are in. Now, somebody can't go upside my head with a blackjack, then come to me tomorrow and say, hey, Chambers, somebody got me. I want you to help me. I'm not that forgiving. But after the knots and bumps go down, after I get my teeth replaced or fixed, after I have a time to pull myself together, then I might. The point I'm getting to is this. Our word should mean something. And the voters ought to be very suspicious of people who are going to put what their religion is. When they would put that little blurb in the paper about me, and they put a notation for religion, you know what they put next to my name? Algebra. I believe in algebra. Math is a universal language. People who don't speak the same language can speak in the language of mathematics if they're dealing with mathematical matters, because 2 + 2 is 4 anywhere. Now, I am going to touch on some things that I had done in the legislature, not just because and by virtue of being there, but in addition to doing my duties. And I'm going to read something that I've read before from the member of the Nebraska Supreme Court, who is now a member of the Federal District Court. His name is John Gerard. He's the one who, while on the Nebraska Supreme Court, listened to what I put in a letter as to why they should not carry out the execution of a guy named Kerry Dean Moore, who'd been on death row for decades. I pointed out that the electric chair was cruel and unusual punishment, that no court anywhere in the country up to that point had had a trial where somebody gave expert scientific evidence about what happens during an electrocution. There was a lower court trial that I attended, and they had scientists, they had doctors, physicists, electricians who could explain what happened to the human body. And it gave they call it a record. That means documentation. It gave a record in a court trial at the lower level that had never been given before in the history of the country. So when Kerry Dean Moore was going to be executed, a date was set to take place a few days after my bill to abolish the death penalty was one vote short of being advanced in the legislature. And I lambasted the Nebraska Supreme Court for being so eager to show me something and to kill somebody, that they had set an execution date for a little more than a month away from the legislature killing that bill. Now, to make this compressed so I can get to other things, I wrote a letter to the Nebraska Supreme Court, and I told them that there was in fact a lower court opinion where the judge ruled that electrocution is cruel and unusual punishment, and therefore the electric chair was unconstitutional. But that would not affect what's happening with Kerry Dean Moore because it was a lower court decision. And the Nebraska Supreme Court, as had the US Supreme Court, ruled that electrocution is not cruel and unusual punishment. So I wrote this detailed letter, pointed out what happens during an execution, how the brain is cooked, how it does not lead to instantaneous unconsciousness, all the gruesome things that happen during an execution. Then I gave the legal arguments that the US Supreme Court, when it has a very important decision to make, and there are a number of cases that will be affected, they will put the decision of this case ahead of other cases. In other words, it's jumped up to the head of the line because the court says, when we decide this case, not only do we decide it, but it affects all these other cases pending that have similar facts and circumstances. So that case is taken out of turn and put before the court. I pointed out that it's clear that the public has no sympathy, public in general, for somebody convicted of murder. Kerry Dean Moore had never said he didn't commit the crime. In fact, what he had done, and it made it possible for the court to hurry up and set an execution date, was to withdraw all of his appeals and put the stipulation that nobody should be able to file anything on his behalf unless he said so, and he was not going to say so. And some crazy Christian minister had told him, go ahead and let them execute him because that would send him right home to Jesus, and he'd be in the lap of Jesus when he's in the electric chair. Crazy stuff. So Carrie Dean Moore, after all those decades, was tired, beaten down, and just was ready to throw in the towel. But because I'm a human being, and I do accept what John Donne wrote in his poem, no man is an island, and I won't go through it all, entire unto itself. Each is a part of the main. He pointed out how not a clod of earth, and he was talking about England then, could be washed away without England being made the less by that loss. So he said, every man's death diminishes me because I am a part of mankind. He should have said humankind to include women, but everything was masculine in those days. Every man's death diminishes me because I am a part of mankind. Therefore, seek not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And whenever somebody died in those days, they rung or tolled the bell. Carrie Dean Moore was going to let the state kill him. And because he was in their clutches and couldn't stop them, he wanted to get it over with. But not only was I a member of the legislature, but I've always been and always will be a human being. And I didn't want the state to set an example by killing somebody. You can punish somebody, but when you electrocute somebody or execute them through the power of the state, it demeans the very concept of human dignity. You debase that individual and place him or her outside of the human family, and the state does that which is punishing this person for having done, and there's that dichotomy, things going in different directions. So I pointed out that this case that I described briefly was in the pipeline and it had been appealed to the court, and that the Nebraska Supreme Court can do like the US Supreme Court does, which is to put all these cases ahead of it on hold, resolve this case, which challenged the constitutionality of the electric chair. And once it's resolved, it would make it easy to handle those cases. I pointed out that Carrie Dean Moore was not going to go anyplace. We all know that people hate somebody convicted of murder, whether they actually did the murder or not. Once the conviction comes in, that person doesn't deserve to live if there's a death penalty. But the Supreme Court has judges who took an oath in the same way I did as a legislator, and their oath bound them to uphold the law and see that justice is done, not to make justice equate to what the mob, uninformed, not trained in the law, full of anger, hostility, and thirsty for revenge. That should not be the basis on which a human being is killed by the state, and the state should not kill any of the residents within its jurisdiction. And I pointed out that Carrie Dean Moore was not going anywhere. If they decide that the electric chair and the death penalty administered as it was in Nebraska at that time, if all of those elements meet constitutional muster, go ahead and do what they're going to do. But they will not have left a T uncrossed, an I undotted, and a question as to whether they executed a man on Monday and then they handle a case on Wednesday where they ruled the electric chair is unconstitutional. To make this longer story shorter, he followed, Gerard that is, the arguments that I laid down in my letter. And if you lay my letter beside the written opinion of the court, you'll see that they match up. Gerard was able to put together a majority of the court, and they ruled that death by execution in the electric chair is unconstitutional. Carrie Dean Moore was spared. This letter is written by Judge Gerard to me, and he's the one who put together the majority that abolished the electric chair. And it's dated October 14th, 2004, a little while ago. Senator Ernie Chambers, with reference to meeting on October 12th. Senator, thank you for visiting with me yesterday. It was an unexpected nugget in my day. Your comment, quote, "You may be preaching to the choir, but it is good to hear / know someone is listening once in a while," was right on point. We all need that. Neither of us are in popular jobs, and we did not seek that. But it is nice to know someone will listen to a well-reasoned argument or position, even if they may not agree with that position. That is what I truly appreciate about you, and hopefully the respect is mutual. In reviewing the legislative history of numerous statutes, I read and examine virtually all of your comments in committee and on the floor of the legislature. I must say that I agree with you on the merits of legislation about 85 to 90% of the time, but I understand your rationale and reasoning 100% of the time. Hopefully, individuals that read my judicial opinions understand my rationale and reasoning nearly 100% of the time, even if they may disagree with the result in a particular case. As we discussed yesterday, if someone will truly listen to you and understand the basis of your reasoning, one of two things will happen. Either A, they will become better educated and adopt your well-reasoned position, or B, they will point out the fallacy of your reasoning and you will become better educated on an issue. Either of those outcomes is highly preferable to ignorance or stubborn adherence to an indefensible position. Thus, I enjoyed talking with you. You were also preaching to the choir. You are a principled man and truly a decent human being. That is the highest compliment I can pay to a man who has fought legally and always above board to improve the plight of everyday Nebraskans of every stripe and creed. Respectfully, John M. Gerard, Judge of the Nebraska Supreme Court. And here's one of those examples of me stepping up when nobody asked me to. There was an allegation when the Franklin Credit Union folded of child sexual abuse, sexual trafficking of young girls, and so forth. I'm going to read this article and hope that I can get through it without sidetracking too much because I have a number of things that I want to get to. Headline, Chambers says woman facing illegal court order. By now, most people know that I have a law degree. And although I didn't attend class, and that's how they allegedly found a basis to keep me out of school for over a decade from getting my degree at Creighton. I ultimately got it because another dean came from the East and had some sense. But at any rate, I read the law, I understood the law. Chambers says woman facing illegal court order. State Senator Ernie Chambers criticized Tuesday what he said is a Douglas County District Court order requiring an alleged sexual abuse victim in the Franklin Credit Union case and her 5-year-old daughter to undergo blood tests. Chambers described the request for the court order as, quote, bonehead action by Samuel Van Pelt, special prosecutor for the Douglas County Grand Jury investigating allegations of child sexual abuse. Chambers said the court order is illegal because he said the law under which it is issued is directed at suspects in a crime, not victims. The law is clear. Why wouldn't somebody else do this? This is a white man going after a white woman and a white child. I'm a black man, hated this day hated then, and will always be hated as long as I'm in this country. But there's an obligation that I have, and it existed long before I gave that affirmation as a senator. I have an obligation as a human being. Quote, "This whole thing smacks of Gestapoism," Chambers said during an interview on KKAR radio, referring to the secret police force of the Nazis. He said the court order is intended, quote, "to intimidate and harass," unquote, the alleged abuse victim. Chambers indicated the order was issued by Douglas County District Judge James Murphy at Van Pelt's request. Van Pelt could not be reached for comment. Previously, he has declined to respond to Chambers' criticism. Murphy said Tuesday that he could not confirm or deny that he had issued such an order. He declined to respond to Chambers' comments. Chambers, who indicated he had seen a copy of the court order, said it cites a section of Nebraska law that covered procedures for obtaining certain, quote, "identifying physical characteristics," unquote, from individuals. It includes the following footnote. The provisions of this section require a showing that there is both probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed and probable cause to believe the person being compelled to submit to a non-testimonial identification procedures committed the crime. Chambers said he would send letters of protest to several officials, including Nebraska Supreme Court Chief Justice William Hastings and Nebraska Attorney General Robert Spire. Chambers said he believed Spire, if asked whether the order should have been issued, would have said, "Don't do it." The woman has testified before the Douglas County grand jury. Chambers repeated his earlier criticism of Van Pelt, saying the former Lancaster County District Judge is, quote, "incompetent," unquote, and doesn't know how to perform the job of special prosecutor. During a KKAR radio interview Tuesday, State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha criticized Murphy's order. Chambers said the request for the order came from Samuel Van Pelt. The court order is illegal, Chambers said, because the law under which it was issued is directed at suspects in a crime, not victims. Then they point out again that I wrote those letters. Deputy Attorney General William Howland said Tuesday evening that Spire had received Chambers' letter. Quote, "We are studying it and reviewing it and will respond to the senator as soon as possible," unquote, Howland said. He declined to be more specific on how soon Spire might respond. The Douglas County grand jury is meeting in secret, and copies of the order and affidavit were not on file Tuesday in the Douglas County District Court Clerk's office. Judge Murphy said he could not comment, he could not confirm or deny that he had issued such an order. He declined to respond to Chambers' comments. Chambers provided a copy of Murphy's order and the Phillips affidavit to the World Herald. Phillips was a cop. The copies had names and places blacked out. Chambers confirmed that the order referred to the 21-year-old woman who is an inmate at the Nebraska Center for Women at York. Chambers declined to say who gave him copies of the order and affidavit, and that's why I got information that other politicians and even judges didn't get. Here's what Spire wrote to me, the Attorney General. Dear Senator Chambers, thank you for your letter. Let me see something here. Thank you for your letter about the Douglas County District Court order issued in conjunction with in the matter of the grand jury of Douglas County, Nebraska. I concur with your view that this order is not proper specifically. I conclude that the order is improper because there is no showing that either person sought to be compelled to submit to identification procedures has been implicated in the commission of a crime. The basis for my conclusion is clearly set out by the Nebraska Supreme Court in the case of State versus Evans, and he gives the citation. After concluding that this order was improper, I decided to intervene in the proceeding by requesting a stay of the court's order. As I was preparing my motion of intervention early this morning, I was advised that the order has been vacated. I commend you for your concern for individual rights of privacy and the legal and constitutional provisions which protect this privacy. Everybody could read the newspaper like I did. They read what I had put. And although none of these officials would comment, they knew I was right. So the judge who issued it took back the order. Suppose I hadn't done anything. Well, when the grand jury finally issued a report, Van Pelt was so upset with me that he had the grand jury attack me in their report. Somebody who wouldn't testify to the grand jury, somebody seeking to amuse my constituents, somebody who hindered the grand jury and all these kind of things, and attacked other people too. It even went so far as to deal with issues that took place in Washington County when a grand jury in Douglas County cannot deal with anything except what happens in Douglas County. I wrote a 50-page brief to the Nebraska Supreme Court because when I went to the county court in Omaha, or the district court, and asked them to remove from that report, which was put into the court records in Douglas County, all the criticisms of me because they went beyond what the grand jury is supposed to do. I was not accused of a crime. I was not indicted. And then I cited cases where that kind of action was condemned by courts because the individual who is criticized publicly in that document has no equal opportunity in the same forum to counteract what was said. And in other states, that kind of stuff was taken out of the grand jury report. Nobody had ever challenged what a grand jury did in Nebraska. I'm not a follower. I don't need a lot of company along. If I think something should be done, I'm the one who does it. And I don't try to get a lot of people to go along with me before I do it. So when Van Pelt, whom I had attacked for issuing that order, having the court issue that order, and for other what I call boneheaded things, as the one who was managing that grand jury, was going to get his revenge by having these negative statements about me. When I took it to the district court, that judge refused to do what I requested. That put me in a position to appeal to the Nebraska Supreme Court. The caption: in grand jury of Douglas County, Ernest W. Chambers appellant, Douglas County District Court, appellee. I was suing the court. Appeal from the District Court for Douglas County, James M. Murphy judge, reversed and remanded with directions. Ernie W. Chambers, pro se. Don Sinberg, Attorney General, and Dolores Cole Barbee for appellee for the state. She was the one who married Barbee, that fool at Horace Mann, who was for beating these children with these paddles, and I had to have that taken care of also. Boslaw is the judge who wrote the opinion. Ernie W. Chambers appeals from the trial court's denial of his motion to expunge material from the report issued by the Douglas County Grand Jury, which was convened to investigate crimes connected with the collapse of the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska. On November 4th, 1988, federal authorities assumed control of the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union. After much publicity and many allegations, the Nebraska Legislature passed a resolution forming a committee to investigate allegations surrounding the closing of the credit union. Chambers, who was a member of the legislature, was appointed vice chairperson of the committee, but later resigned from the committee because it wasn't doing its job. On January 31st, 1990, Robert Spire, then Nebraska's Attorney General, filed an application in the District Court for Douglas County to convene a grand jury for the purpose of investigating allegations of criminal activity connected with the credit union. The grand jury was convened and charged on March 19th, 1990. On July 23rd, 1990, the grand jury completed its report and requested that it be filed and made public. After the report was filed and in the district court, it was released to the public and publicized by the news media. The report was a wide-ranging document. Oh, and by the way, I had written this 50-page brief to the Nebraska Supreme Court. And since this was the first time such an issue had been raised, I requested permission to be allowed to write a brief longer than the maximum number allowed by the Nebraska Supreme Court, and that was granted. And if somebody reads my brief, they will see that this Supreme Court decision followed the cases that I cited, the arguments that I made, because those judges had respect for me. There was a senator named Don Wesley, who was on good terms with the judges. And one of the judges, I think it was the chief judge, told him, because I would get speeding tickets and I'd get them dismissed at the Supreme Court level, that it was a delight to have Senator Chambers appear before the court. He is always prepared. He respects the time limits. He, if a question is asked, will answer the question that the court puts, then look from judge to judge to see if any might have additional questions. And when there were none, he would go back to his presentation. And although he referred to his brief, he did not read his brief as most lawyers do who come before the court. So it was a delight to have him appear. Continuing. The report was a wide-ranging document that discussed numerous matters and individuals and even recommended action be taken in Washington County, which I pointed out in my brief, Nebraska, against certain individuals named in report. Chambers and many other persons were criticized in the report, and much of what was apparently testimony before the grand jury was summarized or otherwise discussed in the report. Grand jury documents were supposed to be secret. These reports were not to be made public. What went on was not to be made public. But Van Pelt was so upset with me, that's what he did. And these are the arguments that I made in attacking that report and saying that the Supreme Court should at least, since I was the one who filed this action, take out of that report the things said about me and publicized. Chambers filed a motion to expunge the page containing criticism of his involvement in the investigation of the credit union case and such other portions of the report as the court deemed fit. His motion was denied on July 17, 1971. Chambers has appealed to this court and assigned as error the district court's failure to grant his motion to expunge. It is the duty of the grand jury to inquire into offenses against the criminal laws of the state of Nebraska alleged to have been committed within the limits of the county in and for which the grand jury was impaneled and sworn, and to determine, based on the evidence presented, whether or not there is probable cause for finding indictments. Then it cites some statutes. The grand jury may, during its term, visit the county jail, examine it, and report its condition. The members of the grand jury are sworn to secrecy, and then they cite this statute. However, a certified or authorized reporter shall be present at all grand jury sessions. All grand jury proceedings and testimony from commencement to adjournment shall be reported. The reporter's notes and any transcripts which may be prepared shall be preserved, sealed, and filed with the court. No release or destruction of the notes or transcript shall occur without prior court approval. The grand jury's report, quote, shall not be made public except, unquote, when it is filed with an indictment, when reporting on the condition of the county jail, or when a person or persons have requested a release and the judge of the district court finds that such release will exonerate that person or persons. None of those conditions were met in this case. In the absence of a statute authorizing such a grand jury has no right to file a report reflecting on the character or conduct of public officials or citizens unless it is accompanied or followed by an indictment charging such individuals with a specific offense against the state. And that's because if the indictment is filed publicly, I can publicly counteract it. But when no indictment is filed, they can issue that report illegally, but the one falsely accused has no forum or platform, the same equivalent of what they had to counteract it. Continuing. Furthermore, anyone who has been the subject of an unauthorized report by a grand jury has a right to have the report expunged. I read the law. I read cases. I knew I was on firm ground. In discussing various jurisdictions' opposition to grand jury reports which criticize specifically named individuals, the Ohio Court of Appeals stated, and I cited this particular case and quoted it because other courts looked at it, were so well written and reasoned. The Mississippi Supreme Court, excuse me, has stated that a grand jury report criticizing a named individual is a conviction by innuendo and not compatible with basic principles of due process and fairness. Other courts have referred to reports which single out unindicted individuals as a perversion of the grand jury system, the work of a lynch mob, and an odious practice. Several courts have pointed out that injury to an individual named in a report can arise not only from the grand jury proceeding, but also from the public's belief that the grand jury speaks with judicial authority. Further, any attempt by a named individual to rebut the contents of the report would not have in the public's mind the same, quote, official weight, unquote, as the report's original accusation. Finally, at least one court has noted that legal remedies available to parties criticizing grand jury reports are often inadequate. That's a direct quote in that case from my brief. In the present case, the grand jury's report was not only critical of Chambers, but was also critical of several other individuals and state and local government bodies without indicting any other persons for criminal offenses. The report only recommended indictment of 3 individuals for criminal offenses. Section 29-1420 provides for publication of, and I cited this statute naturally, provides for publication of the grand jury's report only upon 3 exceptions, one being when the report includes indictments. The other exceptions for publication of the grand jury's report are not applicable in this case because the grand jury did not inspect the jail and there is no evidence that any persons requested the district court to publish the report for the purpose of exoneration. In other words, the grand jury itself was in violation of the law. Because the grand jury's report was not authorized for publication pursuant to section 29-1420, it should be expunged in its entirety from the records of the district court. What the district court wanted to do was seal it. The Supreme Court said no. Expunge, that means erased entirely. It doesn't exist in court records. The judgment of the district court is reversed. The judgment where they ruled against me. The judgment of the district court is reversed and the cause is remanded to the district court, which is ordered to expunge the report of the grand jury in its entirety from the records of the court, reversed and remanded with directions. That is like me being able by proxy to slap the judge who would not do what he ought to have done under the law because he had so much contempt for me. What I have done was put together a number of other cases, which I won't have time to go through because I got off on a tangent. but I'm going to go through them and I'm going to show the research that I do before I go into court, the arguments that I present, the fact that on subjects like radar, VASCAR, clocking by airplane, I demonstrated a knowledge that was more thorough, not only of the officer who wrote the ticket, but the officer with the state patrol who trained these officers who were using these devices. And these are things that would not be publicized, but attacks against me always were. But like Shakespeare, there were a lot of attacks against him, and it was impossible to miss him because he was such a big target. When small-minded people who were envious, who were fearful, and who would come across a Black man who was not going to swallow spit and take low, they couldn't stand that. I didn't scratch when I didn't itch. I didn't smile or laugh when nothing was funny. I did not lower my eyes and fail to look a white person or anybody else in the eyes who was talking to me. I wasn't such a pussyfooter that I could step on somebody's toes without disturbing the polish on their shoes. And the example I always gave of the kind of white pussyfooters that I dealt with in the legislature, you could stretch a piano keyboard from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and these pussyfooting senators could tap dance across that entire keyboard without striking a note. I said they are lap dogs. These are the little dogs that sit in people's lap. They are vomit eaters. Jesus said that certain people are like the dog who returns to its vomit. Oh, I whipped them with their own Bible, their own religion, all these things they said they believed in, their constitution, their laws. And people ask me, why do you say their laws? You live in this country. I said, but I'm not a citizen. Were I a citizen, I would have every right granted by the Constitution, every protection of rights guaranteed by the Constitution. There wouldn't be special laws needed so that I could vote or try to vote. Special laws so that my children wouldn't have to attend segregated, inferior schools. Redlined so that not only could I not buy property in certain areas, I couldn't even get loans. If a white, blonde, blue-eyed, anything got off the boat and came to this country from Europe, soon as that foot hit the ground, that white person who had not yet even obtained citizenship officially has more rights than I have as a Black person, has more rights, every right guaranteed by the Constitution. That white, blue-eyed something has it. Then these ignorant people can run for governor and criticize what they call critical race theory without even knowing what it is. They think that teaching the history of lynching, slavery, the rape of Black women, men, and children is critical race theory. That's not what it is. These white people are so guilt-ridden, so defensive, that they don't want anything said about what their ancestors actually did, that are a matter of record, that their ancestors contemporaneously, meaning at the time it happened, actually wrote about. Thomas Jefferson, who was a president, owned huge numbers of slaves and produced babies on Black slave women. And he talked about how he said, I tremble for my country when I remember that God is just and his justice will not sleep forever, talking about slavery, but he didn't tremble enough to free those slaves, to leave those Black women alone. And then I add this, Miss Jefferson said, Thomas, leave those black women alone. He said, Miss Jefferson, I'll leave you alone first. And he talked about how horrible the example was that slavery produced. It caused young white people to equate work with the work that slaves did, so they didn't want to work. They wanted to be taken care of, and they thought there was no dignity in labor. Thomas Jefferson wrote about these things in a publication called Notes on Virginia. But you think these ignorant, racist white people are going to read anything? If they read their own history, they wouldn't make such stupid, unsupported statements. But they do. And since they control the kill power, they control the courts, the education systems, financial institutions, everything. Now that bombs are falling on Ukraine, white people killing white people. Russians not only are white like Ukrainians, you can't tell them apart. Ukraine and Russia are abutting each other. They've got a common boundary. And were once a part of the Soviet Union. And now the white people are killing white people. Suddenly these white people in America are saying, open the gates and let all the Ukrainians who want to come to this country. They never fought for this country. They did not have thousands of their kind who died fighting for this country, which deprived them of their rights, which even segregated them in Europe, where they're fighting to free white people in Europe. And they're segregated and discriminated against. There were Jews in camps liberated by black people who had never seen black men, and they dubbed them officially black angels. You all ever hear that? Jews did it, and Jews wrote about it. But even Jews don't talk about it because they've got to go along with the white racism in this country, or it'll be turned on them. And Jews are hated to a great extent in this country and discriminated against still. It's difficult for a person who is educated, whether formally in the way that I have been, or informally by those who are denied the opportunity to go to school, but self-educated. They read books. They spent time in libraries. They know a lot. And when you know a lot, you feel a sense of responsibility to yourself, to those like you who are denied their rights, the dignity that should attach. In fact, it does attach to every human being, but it's stripped away. Any culture we had, any language, anything that would redound to our benefit as human beings was stripped away from us when we were dragged to this country. Black Africans, remember, had high-level civilizations. When people ridicule Africa by talking about Timbuktu, one of the best libraries of the day was found in Timbuktu. But anything pertaining to Black people has to be ridiculed and mocked. We have to be made embarrassed of our roots because they deprive us of the knowledge. Right now, they say they can't talk about slavery because it makes little white kids feel guilty. But they didn't care about little Black children, which I was one of, deliberately being made to feel inferior by things like Little Black Sambo, in Jim. It's hard for me to use that word even by quotation, but that was the name of Thomas, I was going to say Thomas Sowell. He's not the one who wrote Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, otherwise known as Mark Twain, considered a great writer. And he named a character in a book with the most degrading term that exists in the English language, the N word. That was his name. And these things were read aloud. And in the classroom, we in those classrooms would have to read it aloud. and then that song, Old Black Joe. And when white people wrote books about the South and black people were ignorant and white people were ignorant, the black people spoke in broken English and white people spoke English. I's coming, my head am bending low. I hears the gentle voices calling old black Joe to degrade the little black children in elementary school who could not defend themselves, who hated to go to school, not because of what school should be, but what school actually was for them. Barbie and his kind would use paddles on those black girls that wouldn't be tolerated in white schools because there would be assault and battery and sexual assault. So I went over to those schools and I took paddles. At Kellum, I went and I took paddles. And I've never been that big a person physically, but I didn't feel smaller than anybody when there was something I had to do. And I never, ever needed a lot of company along. And I never, ever tried to organize people to support what I did. When I got in the legislature, people came to me and asked me would I run because they knew what I had done in the community, often standing alone. I didn't hide. I didn't bite my tongue. I even wrote things to the Public Pulse when I was in my early teens. And some people in books that they write will quote those things that I wrote, and it shocks people because of the negative attitude they have toward me. But what these white people did for me while trying to do something to me was to put steel in me. And if there was fear, they took away the fear DNA. And that's why I would stand up to the police alone, testify before Congress alone, spoke before the United Nations. Why would I, from the backwaters of Nebraska, be sought out by people in Congress, the UN, a so-called riot commission created by Lyndon B. Johnson called the Kerner Commission, recommended by the heads of universities such as Brandeis, Vassar, Pittsburgh, Northwestern, Colorado. I traveled all over this country, requested, and I turned down more invitations than I accepted. There was an outfit called United States Lecture Bureau or something. And when they were trying to get me to sign on, they mentioned Dick Gregory and people such as that. And when people are courteous and polite toward me, I'm the same toward them. I respectfully and courteously declined and pointed out that when you sign a contract such as that, you're giving people the right to determine where you will speak, when you will speak, and what you will say. And none of those things could I comply with. And they talk about the money that I could make. And I told them money is not what I'm after. They talked about all the things that I could buy with money. And I pointed out that with the orientation that I had and what I decided that I have a responsibility to do, money doesn't purchase the kinds of things that had meaning to me. Money could not purchase the things that gave me self-respect. Therefore, the offering of money meant nothing to me. When people would insist on donating to a campaign, now they could give it to other people and other people would campaign for me, but I didn't do it. And if somebody sent me a check, I would write in ink, void, and send it back and tell people that I don't accept money and I will not accept any. I have one article. It mentions those who got the most in terms of campaign contributions, those who got the least. Guess who got the least? Senator Ernie Chambers. Guess what the amount was? Zero. Nada. Because money is not what I'm interested in. And although I need clothes, I don't buy a lot of them. Never wanted a big car. None of those things. Those are tack-ons. They don't make me or enhance me on the basis of what I've got to be to satisfy me, which should be an anthem, not just for Black people, but everybody, was Whitney Houston song, and she unfortunately did not comply with it. And the words are, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And when you're in a society like this, and you're Black, and everything is done to teach you to hate yourself and your kind, learning to love yourself is not only the greatest love, in some cases, it's the hardest acquired love. How could I be worthy of love when I've never done anything, when I'm ugly, when the way I speak has something wrong with it? The texture of my hair is wrong. The broadness of my nose, the fullness of my lips, my color are all wrong. How can I be right when everything about me is wrong? But somehow, some way, what they tried to do to me from the time I was a child didn't take. And I know a lot of people will give credit to their mother because women often have been the backbone that would keep us from total despair. And in other countries, it would be the same thing. When people would mock me, and teachers at Tech thought that I was insane, my mother would say, she always called me Ernest or Ern. I never liked the name, but she hung it on me so for my mother. Oscar Wilde must have heard about me, but because he wrote a poem, a play that became famous, The Importance of Being Earnest, but he spelled it wrong. He put an A in it. But anyway, she quoted a verse to me, and it said, the stone that the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. And she not only believed that, she inculcated that in me. And probably she was what made me what I am, for better or worse. But I like me. I don't know what love is, but whatever it is, if it's that highest feeling of acceptance, then I love myself. I don't need anybody's approval. I don't need anybody's affection. I don't need anything that somebody else possesses and could give to me. There are times that people have asked me to do things that were what they call honors. And if I thought something of the group or the individual, I would swallow hard and I would go along and maybe appear at an event. Now, if children were involved, children own me. Children and animals. But even when it comes to that, the Bible has a racial slur. Can the leopard change its spots or the Ethiopian his skin? But Solomon loved a black woman, the Queen of Sheba. So all of these conflicting currents that we as black people have to deal with, we have to survive in a way that no white people could. They've got everything. They control the economy. They control the housing market. They control the insurance industry, everything. And yet they go crazy every day and they commit suicide. We have to survive in a hostile environment. And when we survive, we're stronger. Now, there are 85-year-old white men who can't, well, younger than that, who can't do as many push-ups as I can do. And it's not to show off, it's to try to take care of what little strength and vitality I may have left. Nobody's going to take care of this old sin-cursed body except me. And when I go someplace and I drop down on that floor and I do 30 push-ups and I'm not breathing hard, then people are oohing and eyeing, even young people. You know who I do those push-ups for? Me. I need to maintain my health. Now, some people say, you don't look like you're 85 years old. I say, I know, I look probably like I'm 130. But like a mummy, once you reach that 1,000-year mark, you don't change very much in terms of what you look like. But our organs inside are continuing to age. And no matter what we do, there's going to be a kind of deterioration because we are a part of the physical universe. And the more time a living thing is here, the less time it has in front of it than before. Then a line is crossed where there are fewer total years in front than have been lived already. And right now, I'm on the back porch of the years of my life, and I know it. I don't like it, but what can I do about it? One of these days, Old Death, the international harvester, not the Grim Reaper. A reaper uses these old time implements, but with technology, it's now the international harvester. When the international harvester comes for me, can I say, I'm not going? I can say it. Is it going to make any difference? It won't. That's my belief. And as Popeye said, I am what I am, and that's all that I am, and that's all that I'll ever be. Maybe as we say in the barbershop, I ain't much, but I'm all that I've got. And I'm enough for me. And no matter what anybody says, what anybody does, they're not going to take that from me. They can try to make it as hard for me to vote as possible, but I'm going to find a way to do it. And when we learn what puts these white people in fear, that's what we ought to run and do. And they fear our vote more than anything. And that's why they do so much to take it away from us. So if you want to put these white people in fear, go register and vote, and then vote. Politics is not something we ought to turn our back on. Some people try to get us as black people to say, I'm not going to get in politics. It ain't this, it ain't that. Well, that's because white people control it, and they've tricked us into saying that the tool that we can get our hands on is the one we ought to turn our back on and not make use of it. If you all had not been putting me in the legislature, I could not have done the things that I did. I wouldn't have had the forum, I wouldn't have had the platform, I wouldn't have had the tools. And that's because you voted for me. You couldn't just say, some people did, I'm for Ernie, I back him. Enough of you went to the polls to send me back more years than anybody who ever served in the legislature in the history of this state. And that record can never be broken or matched because of term limits, which they put in place to get rid of the one black man out of a 49-member body because he was better than 48 white people. Don't that beat all? And now I am subject to the clock, as is everybody who does what I'm doing. So, as the canary said when he found out that the cage door was open, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.